It's not easy to figure out what people think or what they want. It isn't even easy for individuals to figure out what they themselves think or want. It's really hard. If you're going to treat yourself properly, which you should, you have to treat yourself as an iterated process across time properly. So you today, you tomorrow, you next week, you next month, you when you're old. You're already a community if you're going to treat yourself properly. And if you treat yourself properly, you're going to take into account your family, and you're also going to take into account your community, all simultaneously. But the right place to start is with the things that are within your local control, and there's some humility in that. It certainly has nothing to do with instantaneous self-gratification or selfishness. I've been emphasizing the role of personal responsibility instead of ideological identification, right? Get it into your head that you have the capacity for great evil, and stop assuming that that's something that's manifesting itself only in the people that you disagree with politically. Take responsibility for that and try to put your life together. I don't see an alternative to that. You should be aware of your own competence and your limits.
Right.
And that's especially true if you're very young, because like, what the hell do you know? You haven't done anything.
Right.
You're like, I tell 18-year-olds, 6 years ago you were 12. It's like,
right.
What the hell do you know?
Right.
You haven't. You're under the care of your family or the state. You haven't established an independent existence.
Right.
You haven't had children. You haven't started a business.
Right.
You haven't taken responsibility for anything. You don't have a degree. You haven't finished your courses. You don't know how to read. You can't think. You can't speak. You're ill-kempt. You don't know how to present yourself. Well, Jesus, you know,
Yeah.
And it's just not right to tell people in that situation that they should go out and change the socioeconomic structure of the culture. My experience has been that people can do a tremendous amount of good for themselves and for the people who are immediately around them by looking to their own inadequacies and their own flaws and the things that they're not doing in their lives and starting to build themselves up as more powerful individuals. And if they're capable of doing that, and then they're capable of expanding their career. And if they're capable of expanding their career and their competence, then they're capable of taking their place in the community as effective leaders. And then they're capable of making wise decisions instead of unwise decisions when it comes to making collective political decisions. I'm not suggesting in the least, and have never suggested, that there's no domain for social action. I'm suggesting that people who don't have their own houses in order should be very careful before they go about reorganizing the world. I think generally people have things that are more within their personal purview that are more difficult to deal with and that they're avoiding, and that generally the way they avoid them is by adopting pseudo-moralistic stances on large-scale social issues so that they look good to their friends and their neighbors. You're punished for your own goddamn mistakes. And that's another thing I like about the idea of working locally, is that, you know, if I do broad-scale social experiments and they fail, it's like, well, tough luck for the people for whom they failed. But if I'm experimenting on myself within the confines of my own relationship and I make a mistake, I'm going to feel the pain. And that's good, that's just, but it also gives me the possibility of learning. And so I believe that you do solve what you can about yourself first before you can set your family straight and before you should dare to try to set the world straight. Otherwise you degenerate into this kind of, you already talked about it, this shallow moralizing, well, I've divided my goddamn Coke cans up and now I can spend more money on new packaging at the supermarket, which is exactly what the psychological research indicates that people do if they perform a casual moral action. They immediately justify committing a less moral action because they've put themselves in a higher moral place. And you might, if you were a real pessimist, you'd say, well, that's why they performed the action to begin with. I think that's often true. That's associated with that shallow moralizing.